Welcome, friends, guests, and subscribers. Thank you for following my channel's episodes and live broadcasts. Right now, I'm joined by blogger Denis Elisevich. Denis, welcome.
Hello.
Friends, thank you all so much for joining, for liking, for sharing your thoughts in the comments, and of course for subscribing. Subscribe to Denis, subscribe to this channel, and of course join the discussion, because it seems like we're on the verge of something extraordinary. I'll tell you everything step by step. Let me just remind you that the QR code you see on the screen is an opportunity, if this service works for you, to support the channel and display something on the screen. A question, opinion, wish, or suggestion. Final broadcast questions are accepted via YouTube community, closed viewers club, and live chat. But please don't write them in advance. Write them at the very end. It's like a guarantee that you'll ask your question and get an answer. And of course, watch the broadcast until the end. Let's start by communicating directly with you, dear viewers who are in the chat. You are invited to vote. Complete the sentence. Pokrovsk is the gateway to options B, hell escalation and loss of territories. Well, I mean a new option B, the collapse of the front. How does everyone interpret Minsk 3 and the freezes? That's the usual story, the Debaltsev and Ilovaisk encirclements. There are always some Minsk agreements happening, and now this so-called hypothetical Minsk 3 is brewing, ripening, and in principle it makes sense. The next option is kind of a gateway to chaos. The image of Ukraine's military and political leadership is completely undermined. Zelensky, who denies everything, Chersky, who reports on victories. And there's another option, nowhere, that is into nothingness. They'll claim that's how it was meant to be, that nothing's there, but we've been seeing this for the past hour and a half. The Minister of Internal Affairs says there's nothing in Kupinsk, no general staff and no encirclement. As for Pokrovsk, well, look at the flag, they just took it down with the drones, so don't worry. In general, it's not what you see, it's not what they're reporting. You can choose from 4 options. Denis, Pokrovsk. So the whole situation in Pokrovsk. Where is this? What is this a precursor to? Where are the gates?
Gee, to be honest, it's unpredictable, but I would choose nowhere. Honestly, I'll tell you, I would choose nowhere. Well, any option is possible, but you always have to make an allowance for President Trump. No matter the outcome, his influence will be greatest there. And right now, the situation has reached a point where things aren't so simple, and I wouldn't pay attention to all those tricolors. Just like the one you put in the preview with the picture from our broadcast. It's all, you understand? Even if the Russians capture Pokrovsk, it will of course be a major political blow for Zelensky. I'll never forget when President Biden was in office and we were at the United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York. And Zelensky said there that he would take back 2 regional centers, something like that. Remember Bakhmut and 2 other regional centers. He was talking about that. It was caught on camera. And I remember well, Fortress Bakhmut. I'm not telling the military how to fight, but what happened in Bakhmut was a political decision. And now we're getting to what I've probably been shouting about for years. Each additional month or 6 months of war will only make outcomes worse. Right now we're talking about danger. We're talking about Pokrovsk. So, does that mean the situation is actually bad? Of course, what you said is a lie. The general staff, they're lying, naturally. Well, Sash, it's all as usual, well.
It's the same as always, but still, what's the point? After all this is tied into big politics in a military way. And even Putin, who today, well, was having tea, had a sweet table with his military, he did it that way. There are 2 powerful messages like that. One powerful message is in the media, yes, in the world media. This is about Poseidon and also Sarmat. Soon there will be Poseidons. So this is a continuation of this topic with Burevestnik. It's clear who the message is for, yes. It's a message to America on one hand and a message to Ukraine on the other. Moreover, I want us both to consider this. Let's start with the second one and then move closer to Trump. Look, so, subtitles, commanders, subtitles, well, they're expressing to Putin that they're not against it. Subtitles. Subtitles created by Dima Tozok. Basically, look here, we can immediately list several blows to Zelensky. The first question, can you enforce a ceasefire in these conditions? Will your order make everyone stop shooting? Second, is Zelensky ready for an extraction like Azovstal? And third, letting journalists in, real journalists, absolutely everyone, including Ukrainian ones. That is, it would absolutely highlight what's happening there, which obviously the Ukrainian authorities are not ready for. Well, because even now, they filter those correspondents who go to the front lines or show the other side of the war. So we understand that I don't really want to draw such conclusions, of course, but they seem obvious. Just like Zelensky was humiliated in the White House, in the Oval Office, the same kind of media humiliation is happening now from the Russian side regarding this situation. Some will say it's an information war, military propaganda, and so on and so on. Like, just don't pay attention to it. But basically, you have to respond to these three statements somehow. You can't just stay silent. What do you think? Will he be able to handle this tension when, let's say, we'll discuss that later. He gave an interview saying that when America behaves this way, it's understandable that Russia picks up on it and sets the same kind of media trap for Zelensky.
Well, if we're starting with Ukraine, as you said, from the second point, we're starting with Ukraine. Thank you. First of all, I don't believe in any kind of second Azovstal. As you correctly said, everything is seen through the prism of politics. This will be a major setback for Zelensky. Putin's remarks are pure military propaganda. But on the other hand, once again, the KGB outplays the KVN in unconventional solutions. We've talked about this on air. I said both Trump and Putin should be approached with unconventional proposals. So it turns out that for the KGB, the KVN is so predictable, they easily outsmart them. Even though I'm against KVN as a pro-Ukrainian, I really don't like it from Ukraine's perspective. With this statement, Putin delivered a strong blow to Zelensky. We have to admit that. Zelensky is now trapped by his own choices. He insists on this issue only to retain power, not to end the war, seek compromise, discuss elections, or restore the political process. But what Putin has done now, in fact, Zelensky himself paved the way for him. Why? This situation should never have happened. You see, the situation is very bad and it could have been avoided. How? We had many options. I always mention this on air, but everyone seems to have forgotten. There, Zelensky, Xi Jinping is mentioned. And the Chinese gave their own plan with 12 points. And you know, that plan wasn't anything super scary. That plan looks better than what we see today. Everything is on Google. Zelensky rejected it all. No, absolutely not. No withdrawal along the demarcation line. The situation is worsening. Will the line of demarcation be worse in 6 months than it is today? And it's not certain that it will even be possible to discuss it then. That's why things are the way they are. As for President Trump's Poseidons, look, over there they have this Petrel or whatever it's called, 8,000 kilometers or so, some kind of missile. That's typical Putin. He rattles his weapons because he has nothing else to boast about. Trump told him to sit down and calm down, saying, we have a nuclear submarine nearby. We don't need long-range missiles. Calm down. And Putin keeps escalating. Everyone has probably been hearing about this Poseidon from Soloviev for 6 or 7 years on air. He keeps scaring people with this Poseidon. New York, Miami, coast ashes. None of that will happen. None of that will happen. Here, I support this, in my opinion. The Minister of Defense of Belgium said today, if Russia dares to use nuclear weapons in any form, then Moscow will be wiped off the face of the earth. I'm not a fan of this minister. He lacks character. But here he said the right thing. Putin needs to calm down. Putin needs to make clear demands if he doesn't like Zelensky. I know this was discussed in Alaska. They need to say remove Zelensky, hold elections more clearly. But he's kind of playing with people's lives. One way or another, people are dying. And here, Congresswoman Anna Paulina said it well. Lunaya, have you read it? No? She said, these European war hawks are causing trouble, but young people on both sides are dying. She called them sociopaths. I think Putin and Zelensky are both sociopaths.
Here, look here, we can see we're observing a game on a different scale, yes, on a different level. Of course, America is imposing sanctions. That's a controversial issue. How strong are they? The Western press calls this an average or middle option, neither light nor heavy. Some compare it to a drop in the ocean. Some people laugh at Dmitriev, who immediately went to America and held a series of meetings. Others say, no, there's nothing funny about this. Because today, right before our broadcast, Dmitriev came out and said, well, he basically admits that this whole story with Ukraine, yes, an agreement needs to be reached between the United States and the Russian Federation. So within a year, that's basically the result of Dmitriev's visit. Yes, the visit went well. Everything was fine, and they even had some of that chocolate Anna Paulina Luna brought. So there is some work being done, but Ukrainians remain hostages to the relationship between the United States and Russia, and the way they act is just them showing off to each other. One says, I have the world's most powerful submarine. The other replies, I have the Poseidon, which can't be detected or shot down, or the Burevestnik that can fly indefinitely. That's their relationship. But where is Ukraine in all this? That's the important question. Because on one hand, there are people who claim that Zelensky has kind of been written off, and this whole story with, that's trolling KGB and KVN. I agree with you. So it's like a captain's contest, only that the captains have stars, you know? And it's obvious. It's obvious, like, figuratively, playing four-handed. They're undressing Zelensky, first of all, while he himself stays clothed and undresses all Ukrainians. So we end up running around, running and running, naked and lost. And it's unclear whether there will be money for next year. It's still unclear. Europe is supposed to help us, but Europe still hasn't made any decision. They walked around discussing and said, let's agree on these Russian funds in December. But they will be working hard on a plan to stop the fighting, a plan. Yes, they announced this plan to us in advance. What do you think about the Europe plan? How coordinated or not coordinated at all is this with the American side? I mean, the American administration. And, well, recently there was the anniversary of Zelensky's victory plan. Well, a year ago, on the 16th, I think, he came out and read it from the podium. Over a year, we can see what came true and what didn't. This plan involves the Europeans, who are expected later this week. Same type.
The plan is a circus, and there's no point in discussing it seriously at all. The plan is still being written. And then Zelensky comes out and says, yes, there will be a plan, but Putin won't accept it. This is what the president of a country at war says. You know, this is real KVN already. You're laughing, but it's really just something to laugh at. How can you act like this at such an important moment? Can you imagine? Right now, it's Israel-Gaza. There's a peace plan. Vitkov and everyone, including Rubio and Vance, is working on it. If someone left the country and said, we're drafting a plan, but Gaza isn't participating or accepting it, they'd instantly show they're not serious. And he comes out and says this, then why waste time, and who needs a plan that won't work? Let's describe a plan that will work, but they won't write such a plan. Zelensky, why? Because a plan that would actually work automatically means the political end of Zelensky. Do you understand? If Ukraine's interests were the top priority, this plan would be accepted, but they're not. And while it all looks so ridiculous, I really don't see any point in discussing it at all. Regarding the sanctions are real, they're medium-strength sanctions. Here's a preview for you. There are still many surprises ahead, and possibly even this year. By the way, both for Russia and for Zelensky personally. I'm not talking about sanctions regarding Zelensky, there are other things. And as for Russia, anything can happen. These sanctions will really hit Russia's economy in a few months, but it won't affect the war in any way. Putin will just have to cut some expenses, but the war will still be his priority. That's how it works. About Dmitriev, you introduced me as a blogger, but that's not entirely accurate. I can explain it to you. They really got scared, and huge amounts of money was spent so that lobbyists could organize a lot of things here in America in a super short time. These chocolates and gummies are like that. I'm hinting they might be from there. A large group of people was working. Honestly, they got scared. Dmitriev, well, of course, he's a propagandist, but in my opinion, he's one of the most harmless in that whole group. I don't know about the European Union. What's there to discuss? Look, when Zelensky flew to the West, again, they hugged and greeted each other. What's the point of all that? You see, any such round of media escalation eventually ends. Well, the mayor or an assistant sits down and writes a post on VEX. We stand together until the end. Starmer will supply 5,000 rockets and drones. Starmer will be out any second. In Britain, Ana Aijel Faris, with a 90% chance of becoming prime minister, says in an interview, "My intuition tells me Putin is a bad guy. And I wouldn't want to deploy troops in Ukraine. And where she doesn't want to deploy troops, she won't want to give missiles either. Because they don't want Britain to be seen as fully involved in the war. So the rhetoric will be different, in any case, more conservative. And everything that Starmer is saying now, who has absolutely no support, absolutely no rating, it's all empty talk. How many times have we seen this? Do you remember? 6 months ago, Starmer, Macron, Scholz, Tusk, and another person arrived together. There was a photo of the five walking together. They smile while walking. What's the result? Nothing has changed. Everything remains the same. It's all just for show.
But at the same time, the war continues and is becoming much more destructive. Zaychuk comes out, he's the main head of Ukraine and Ergo. And he says, guys, this will be the hardest winter in Kiev. Because there were strikes on the 10th and 20th of some month. Well, in general, they seriously undermined the company's energy capacity. Yes, the Kiev authorities are saying, we're building new thermal power plants, we're working with everyone there. That also sounds cool. Second level of protection, second level of protection. Wow, that's impressive. Well, then he actually clarifies, this manager, the deputy. On Zelensky's line, the head of the military regional administration, he says military civilian. He says there's one Shahed there. Basically, it's designed so that one drone arrives and that's it. Next, to build again from scratch, it turns out to be some kind of bottomless barrel. Well, you have to build, you have to shed hits once, and you have to rebuild from scratch. We're building new power plants. What happened to the old ones? Were they destroyed? So we're hearing absolute dishonesty about the coming winter in official statements. Dishonesty that's mainly about money and this so-called reconstruction. Is an apocalyptic winter really approaching Kiev? The reason I'm focusing on Kiev is because if it happens in Kiev, then it will happen everywhere else too. Everyone else will also be in big trouble. Well, maybe Transcarpathia and a little bit nearby will be affected too. Overall, it might be a bit easier for Lviv, though other issues could arise. If there are problems in Kiev, everyone will be affected.
Yes, I confirm. There really will be an apocalypse in Kiev. I get really angry when I hear advice from officials. If you have the opportunity, leave Kievans, leave because they've gone crazy. Well, 3-5% of people have the opportunity to go somewhere, but what about the rest? This is totally out of bounds, beyond all limits. Regarding the statements of these, let's call them energy figures, why do you even want to talk? So, this power plant has one type of protection and that one another. Why? Maybe just give the Russians all the details and coordinates. It's absurd and I won't stop saying it. And where is Mustafa Nayem, who handled billion-dollar budgets, who is calmly sitting in restaurants in Kyiv? His sister publishes some dumb books. His brother is involved in United States Agency for International Development Propaganda. Where is Mustafa Nayem? Do you understand? Now, there's a guy who went to the investigative department or something. It's all a nightmare. The rest are barely there. It's prison. And the guy just walks around freely. That's the whole thing. That's the entire post-Soviet system. It was like this even before Zelensky, but allowing it during the war is a disgrace and absurd. I can't predict anything good for the people. It's clear what Putin's goal is. And believe me, again, no one will be held accountable. There will be trouble. And no one will take any responsibility. This is from the same story near the start of the broadcast. But why did we allow this situation to happen when we could have entered this winter at least at the stage of a truce, into a truce or something like that? No, absolutely not. Zelensky is firm. You've seen his recent statements. I won't trade territories or make concessions. How can you even negotiate with him at all? I'm on Ukraine's side, but how can you negotiate with Zelensky? Just judging by his rhetoric?
Well, that's why they don't negotiate with him. That's why, apparently, the negotiations will be conducted at the level of the United States and the Russian Federation. But, excuse me, Europe supports him. Why? That's the main question.
And do you know why he recently went to Sweden? Have you seen those planes? Yes, the Prime Minister is taking pictures over his shoulder, showing the planes. They made a deal there. Yes, those planes will be in Ukraine. Who knows when? and whether they will be there at all is still a big question. They immediately start saying Ukraine needs its own weapons production. And Zelensky, let me get to the point. Zelensky says, starting in November, we will begin exporting weapons. That's the whole model and Zelensky's plan. You mentioned the victory plan, but now there's a completely new plan. I call it the Erdogan model. The state makes weapons. Under Erdogan, there are so-called private companies, but everyone knows they're run by him, his family, and his clan. It's the same in Ukraine, except with Erdogan. Turkey isn't at war, but people fear Turkey's powerful army. And this guy wants to sit down and decide who gets what and where. Europeans think, well, what a guy, let him handle it over there. Ukraine is often seen as a buffer, not a country by globalists, and faces constant internal conflict. So let them produce weapons cheaply. Here's an approximate ratio. 100,000 euros spent on armaments, using small amounts for clarity. 100,000 euros on weapons. Production in Europe costs 40,000. But in Ukraine, you see it's 2 times or more cheaper. And they think, great, just great. Let them produce there, let them fight, and we'll live comfortably. Yes, we'll meet Zelensky once every 6 months, hug him, kiss him, send him back, and promise something. That's what Ukraine is needed for, and that's how I see it. Listen, 2026 is just around the corner. The largest country in Europe, and to bring it to this state, well, that's unbelievable. But no matter how bad they are, those currently leading the European Union, Ursula, the presidents, the prime ministers, if Zelensky hadn't given his approval for this, it wouldn't be happening. In any case, the final word is his. He gave his approval for this and he's fine with it. The New York Times publishes an investigation into a film company suspected of casting for Zelensky 3 years ago. Yeah, well...
That's for sure, yeah.
I just always urge people to really realize the amount. $1 billion United States dollars just came into the company's account. Yeah, that's a 6 or even more, and it's not even hidden anymore. And by the way, the globalist media, the New York Times, is one of the main ones, and this confirms what I was saying. The decision is not to remove Zelensky abruptly, but to gradually strip away his power. And these articles every week confirm that.
So how do you fight for 2 or 3 years? Yuri Lutsenko also recently caught him on this. Well, Lutsenko is also a rather peculiar guy. Of course, no doubt he was selling, yes. Still, you know, there's this expression, political animal, and that's what Lutsenko is, a political animal. Oh, yes, some call him completely corrupt, others disagree, but he truly represents Ukrainian politics. You could also mention Timoshenko and a few others. So Lutsenko says, look at the game Zelensky's playing. He calls Tusk, who tells the Western press that Ukraine can keep fighting for another 2 or 3 years. This is kind of broadcast to Europe, and internally it's also broadcast. We are closer to peace than ever. We will now force Russia, and there will be peace, and there will be a ceasefire along the line of contact. Everyone paid attention as Pokrovsk, then Kupiansk and Vovchansk were captured, but suddenly no one talked about them. After the dam in Belgorod was hit, everyone went quiet. But wait, the water will go away there. The situation was just critical right there in the north of Kharkiv region. And that's why they took such very risky steps. Because if we imagine that they use symmetrical responses, well, it won't show much at all. I mean, just like that, hitting dams and objects that change the landscape indiscriminately. Well, the landscape of war is a very tough story. Well, about the dams, then the tragedy, then Zelensky. Why has he been able to speak there in such a simple way for 2 or 3 years? To the Ukrainians, wait, we have a window of opportunity if he stays in power. After all, by and large, this statement to the outside audience is also hard to consider truly rational, wise, balanced, or great. And inside it's pure lies. Well, it turns out he lied there and he lied here. The truth is somewhere in the middle, and in the middle I just keep sitting on my chair, on my throne.
Well, look, you say he's telling the domestic audience peace will come soon. I don't really hear that. What I keep hearing all the time is, I'm not ready for compromise. I'm not ready for this. That won't happen. This won't happen. No, we
want peace. We want
peace. Not just a declaration or a statement. Yes, not...
No, that's it. He's been writing this topic a lot lately. Exactly this. You know.
Who are these statements for? Putin?
Putin doesn't want to, but I do. I support peace.
Yes, it's all for Trump. He knows everything is being documented and reported, and he's read it. I'll tell you my version based on previous information and facts. The Tusk interview was published in the original source, the New York Times. That's not a coincidence either. And Tusk kind of shared part of a private conversation with Zelensky. He actually quoted him. We could fight for 2 or 3 years, but not 10. He was worried it could last that long. That's also someone slowly losing their mind. And that's also a signal. Tusk is aligned with the globalists and their appointees. They're having him tell the world that Ukraine can keep fighting for 2 or 3 more years. Zelensky didn't personally say it. He likely wouldn't do something that reckless now. It's Tusk who's doing this. That Tusk is a war hawk. Simply put, Tusk is a war hawk.
Vince says, so he's being asked again in an interview about the situation with Zelensky. It was somehow planned together with the president, like, this situation. Vince says, no, did you expect Zelensky to explode like that? He says, no, he was very rude. That was, in general, it affected me. 8 months ago, we moved on, and so did he. Now he comes in wearing suits. And in that same interview, well, at least that's how they took the quote and spread it, that Vince says. This is probably maybe my brightest, well, like, a bright presentation, yes, of myself, that's what I mean. Because it's clear that Vice President is a high position, but it's still kind of a bit in the shadow, obviously, of Trump, well, the #1 president. Yes, thank you. Vince also says everything is fine. Everything is leading to the fact that the war is moving in a direction where it will not be beneficial for non-Russians to fight. Especially for Ukrainians, both sides will see the war must end. Honestly, the strategy isn't that great. It sounds pretty provocative coming from Vince. In the context that, anyway, this is more in favor of Zelensky. Zelensky wants Americans to simply think, let them fight as long as possible. That's exactly what they're counting on. I have a question. Why? And is it true that the page has been turned on the conflict between Zelensky and Vince? And in general, with prominent Republicans or Trumpists, Trump supporters, members of the administration, senators, basically that circle which is considered Trump's closest entourage. And the second point, why does America choose the path of giving, of fighting to the end? They basically won't put pressure on Zelensky, won't force him to do something to stop the war. Somewhere to please Putin, and of course somewhere Putin will also make some concessions or compromises to please Trump and Ukraine.
Well, about Vince, let's start from the end. Why aren't they putting pressure? I'll explain to you. That option is still available, but if it was once a top 3 solution, it's now much lower on the list. Because right now I'm telling you how it's being considered here. If Zelensky is suddenly removed now, what will happen and who will take over? Instead of him, there will be a figure who doesn't suit the United States because they're looking at how Klitschko is today. Who today has a rating and real chances? Not in a year, maybe in 6 months or 2 years something could change. But right now there aren't such people. It would just be replacing one with another. That's why, as I said, the decision was to gradually strip his power. They won't bring him down abruptly now for just one reason. The issue of elections is very relevant here. I mean, why bring him down now if we can let the situation develop to the point where, say, elections are held in the spring and he simply won't be elected? That's the context for all this. Vence's performance was remarkable and the relationship shifted. That's the current rhetoric. Don't apply as pressure, so Putin can't show off. We've already allowed that before. After the Oval Office, Putin thought, now we're all going to collectively crush Zelensky. They're now balancing media coverage for neutrality. Trump is challenging Putin after being disrespected. This is when Trump's patience snapped, and the administration's stance on the issue shifted significantly. So now they're going to talk to Putin very toughly, but in a way that doesn't break off negotiations and allows them to act. To be continued, to be continued.
Well, that's what explains these Poseidons and Burevestniks, because it's a historically justified story. As soon as a tough conversation starts, there are immediately tests or something like that. So look, there aren't any elections expected at all. Well, take the situation with Trukhanov, for example. It's just a disgrace. Then Zelensky, the guarantor of the constitution, comes out and says, I don't care, I'm not interested in which passport is fake and which one is real. The security service of Ukraine informed me about a passport, so I revoked his citizenship. Only after revoking his citizenship do they charge Trukhanov. And now let's think, what exactly are they charging him with? Well, after they've already taken his passport. Well, probably some kind of schemes, fraud, money laundering, selling some land, son of a bitch. No, it rained, and the city authorities were negligent. 9 people died. Well, that was during the flooding of Odessa. It's a very populist, great case. Very populist. People love that kind of thing. This could be a sign that this direct presidential control over Odessa, since Elisevich and the head of Odessa were both appointed by the president, well, also by the president. Yes, many people say that the terms of office have expired and everything will be reviewed again, even by Zelensky himself. Well, alright, look, he's putting his own administration in place. And Elisevich is so unpopular that they have to open a criminal case for obstruction against Trukhanov. All because of some populist motivation.
There's a good word for it. They're catching up. Right now, they're going after Trukhanov in every possible way. As I already told you, I'm definitely not a fan of Trukhanov. He's not my hero. Such political lawlessness is certainly not a sign of a civilized country. It's obvious. They're just removing him from power. There are several possible reasons, discussed both privately and in the press. This is really something, and I'm at a loss for words. Then suddenly this situation happens. And when Berlin organized this event, Chernigov killed people, the Russians shelled them to be continued. It's like water off a duck's back since she's close to them and sings what they want. Trukhanov, that's where it happened. Terrible incidents, of course. In Ukraine, we've had many similar cases. You could jail everyone right now, including mayors. Sadly, human life is valued nowhere here. So that's it. You see, it's all typical. About Elisevich, as I mentioned, I tried to check his biography, but nothing is known except for a certain recent period. He's obviously a security service guy, but I don't want people like him in Ukrainian politics. He doesn't have the kind of face, of a person who... Let me put it this way. It's not that I don't want to say anything. People get what I mean.
But still, about Elisevich, it's amazing. He says we need to organize a month of cleanliness, clean up Odessa, you understand.
I feel sorry for Odessa. You know what's sad? Like you said, Zelensky presents such cheap ways to sell people this nonsense or a new leader. It's so cheap, and I feel sorry for the people. They have no rights. Why did they allow a dictatorship? It's too late now. They've already allowed it. And by the way, I'll connect this topic now. They mentioned the shelling of Kyiv. Here are the people. The people. Last week, I had many conversations with people from Kyiv. The war must end there. These shellings need to stop. They're under fire telling me, yes, it should end, but always with some condition. But sorry, I just have a different understanding of freedom. I don't get that, and I feel it very deeply. People endured, they're enduring. No further comments.
How did they wear them down? Subtitles?
Even just like in Russia.
This is really important. Look, do you remember how everyone was proud? I can really feel it. I remember it. It's like I can sense it right at my fingertips. You feel how great it is that this person isn't a politician, not someone from the system. Remember when Zelensky was elected in 2019? Now he's going to come. He's going to act fairly, not tied to any party, political or oligarchic obligations, none of that. He'll just come and get things done. And it turns out that it wasn't a politician who managed to inspire the people like that. Not a politician. That is, no politician has ever managed to do that.
I wouldn't want it that way, though it was commonly called that, and his supporters still do. Zelensky is from the system. Zelensky never built anything in the market. Zelensky worked with oligarchs who pay in cash or offshore, outside of Ukraine's financial system. These are not market conditions. Not like the ones I did business under in Ukraine, or like a bunch of people who are watching us now. The previous ratings of Channel 1+1 and accordingly Quartal 95, this is the level of influence of a small faction in parliament, or maybe even a medium one. Objectively. An order arrives, a script is written, and someone's reputation is ruined or spun as desired, or something terrible happens. Hee ha ha. People laugh at themselves, as I call it, and applaud. After all, only idiots can like what they've done in terms of politics. That's it. He's a real politician. Moreover, I don't know if you know this or not, but did you know that he submitted his candidacy to run against Poroshenko for the first time in 2014? Zelensky's lawyers submitted the documents, but they were withdrawn last minute. This is official. No, I didn't.
I haven't heard about that.
And I'm telling you this for sure. Then they saw the situation. No, let's withdraw. Well, how can you not call this person a politician? He was on the edge, just waiting for the signal. Favorable conditions occurred in 2019. Yes, I voted for him, but mainly to oppose Poroshenko. All this Mavavira army, radical nationalism, and hype, I knew it would cause trouble, and it did. I didn't think Zelensky would pick it up. He was re-recruited.
Well, the fact that he was re-recruited, that's one thing, but what are the main reasons? Are there any forecasts for this situation, and could the Trump-Xi Jinping conversation make a difference? I've been asking this question a lot lately. Not because I think that Trump and Xi Jinping are meeting for a completely different reason. I understand that they have their own very tense and interesting things going on between them. Even Japan, it would seem. Yes, Japan is coming to this new female prime minister. Trump and Milo are meeting her too. She says, I'm going to nominate you for the Nobel Prize next year. She gets this cap as a gift. Japan is coming back. Everything is so good and bright. They are signing an agreement on rare earths, even though it's Japan and rare earths. It's a very specific thing. Well, it's a specific issue. They don't have such large volumes, but still. So basically, they're doing everything to please Trump. And today, Reuters writes that in principle, well, they refused Trump's request not to buy energy resources from Russia. The Japanese, I mean, if the Japanese are an ally, despite all the historical twists and turns, they're still an ally of America. If they refuse this, then why should Xi Jinping agree? Trump says he will ask them to refuse or reduce energy supplies from Russia. But she, obviously, if the Japanese woman refused, she will refuse too. And so, what do you think will be on the table between Trump and Xi Jinping regarding the issues of Ukraine?
Xi in Japan is not that simple. Wait for statements. Give it a week or two, maybe even 3, as a classic once said. So, regarding Xi Jinping, 100% Ukraine will be discussed. But it's far from certain that this will be declared publicly afterward. So we're discussing it. Maybe they'll vaguely say, we discussed Ukraine. In reality, this is one of the main topics, which is a link in a huge chain of various different events. The strategic goal of Trump and in general the United States is to divide Russia and China. This alliance cannot be allowed. I suspect Trump will try this, possibly offering Xi Jinping favorable trade terms, especially on tariffs. But let's end the war and not let China and Russia stick together. From that view, both Venezuela and others will be involved. What are Trump's plans? And this is one huge combination, a very large multi-step combination where Ukraine is just one of the sides, so to speak. Subtitle editor and proofreader Kulakova.
Dennis, key point. Right now, there's some kind of frantic rhetoric going around. Well, it's just another cycle, another one. Basically, it's the spinning of this meat grinder, the hostility and division among Ukrainians over the topic of mobilization. Whether it's equivalent or not, and so on and so on and so on. Basically, everyone will serve. Those who haven't served have no right. Those who have fought have the right. And basically, mobilization is getting stricter, stricter, and stricter. This is already a somewhat relevant topic. Familiar, you know, many people are tired. Tired of being surprised, tired of, well, grieving about it and getting upset and being shocked by what they see. They're tired. But there's definitely a new twist in this topic too. So, look, if over there it's just openly, as they say by Zelensky's propagandists, openly, if you watch those videos there, if you have them on your channel, for example, on your social media, then you're an enemy. You're an information psychological special operations agent. You're for Russia. And the phrase that all the videos are generated by Potorayev's artificial intelligence is, of course, just some kind of, well, peak absurdity. You know, it's like at the front. Yes, no, there's nothing there. Pokrovsk and Kupiansk aren't surrounded, and everything is fine overall. And really, leave us alone. It's all artificial intelligence. And now mobilization, it's all lies. It's all made up by the Russians. Well, what Russians? Everyone knows perfectly well. People's relatives are dying. It's really tough. Well, I had a conversation recently. He died at the TCC. Yes, a son. And the people are older, and they... In short, there you see, they are waiting. They are waiting for a change of power. If I may say so, not to put it too radically, they are waiting for Russia. Well, because these Federal Security Service guys will come, and they'll catch these TCC guys and take revenge, because not all of these TCC guys will leave. And what did I realize in this conversation? This immobilization is like they've dug a grave for Ukraine in terms of Ukrainian society, when it doesn't matter to a person what flag it is, as long as someone gets punished. Those freaks who catch, beat and abuse people, well, you can't bring your son back anymore. Still, they also live with the idea of revenge. What do you think about this problem, and why does Zelensky, well, keep such silence, such shameful silence?
I sympathize with them and hope it's just emotions when they say we're waiting for Russia. Hearing that is awful. We've already discussed this topic with you today. Society, if you look at the history of all dictators, and the latest example is Russia, society doesn't reach this point in a single day or even a single year. With Zelensky, it's happening much faster than normal. After which an individual citizen can no longer do anything. You feel powerless and intimidated, with the entire propaganda machine at work and everyone involved. And all sorts of bastards like Petrov, Zolkin, and people like Natalka Mozhichuk. The security service of Ukraine will knock on everyone's door. That's a meme. That's what it is. And that's the tragedy when you're being threatened. Previously, a top journalist from the highest rated channel was targeted by the special services. I know more juicy details about Moshiachek, but I won't share them on air. She's involved too. So, well, Sasha, I really don't know. You say they killed me. They say they killed everywhere. Here killed, there killed, all over Telegram, killed, beaten, assaulted, and that's it. And nothing happens, and nothing is happening right now. But the tension is rising, and the moment will come when what hasn't happened yet will happen. It's like when a person has delayed stress, and then later you feel bad or something like that. Then it will hit, believe me, it will hit later. And Zelensky absolutely doesn't care about this. I'll tell you why this happened. He himself didn't expect this situation. Because of his own foolishness. Then it went so far that they realized, we won't be able to manage this process any other way. We can't carry out proper mobilization, proper recruiting. A strategy was chosen. I was forced to leave Kiev in the fall of 2022, and even then I already felt what was going to happen. Even though it wasn't really happening yet. That is, the strategy was chosen to completely clamp down on the country from within, to poison it, to literally terrorize it. Now I'm asking myself a question. Despite all the problems, the Ukraine I left was different. Why, when you have an enemy like Putin outside, dangerous in a full-scale war, would you organize terror against your own people inside Ukraine? Then this scum appears as a business ombudsman and says, this one will die, that one will leave. People from Bangladesh and India will come, live, work, and be happy here. It's absurd, it's absurd. And I understand the answer. He can't govern any other way. He, like Netanyahu, can't govern any other way. During war, hundreds of thousands protest, with about half of Israel, or at least 40% opposing you. Many people are against you. Here's the situation. Globalists are active, lots of money is invested, there are many media opponents, but he doesn't target his own citizens with terror. That's a big difference, but Zelensky has no other option. That's why there's a security service of Ukraine officer in Odessa, and there's a security service of Ukraine officer there and another one there. It's actually very funny to watch. I just remembered something about Odessa for a second. Kuiper is beside Lysak, and Kuiper's wife is a Russian citizen. That's nothing unusual. They're catching up with Truka. Well, anyway, it's all such a mess, it's terrible.
No, well, it's definitely a mess, but still. Again, here comes the question of the food supply. It's obvious what they feed on. For example, a deputy from Kamilchuk is coming out now. This is the news that's being spread right now during our broadcast. He says, can you imagine some commandos on the front line are reselling drones that volunteers brought them? Or that were provided by the government? That's certainly a special kind of flair, or maybe, well, for some it's a pleasure. When you're on the outside, not a Ukrainian, not a Russian, just nobody. So you can look at it from the outside like this and judge it. How propaganda collapses. It falls apart in serious chunks. Yeah, the propaganda plaster just crumbles off like that. Have you noticed that lately we don't have anything sacred left? I directly connect this to when all this movement around the church started. That's when it all began. And this was even back when Poroshenko was in charge. Nothing sacred was left, you understand? I mean, at least we had the military guys, the most impressive and strong ones. People trusted them more than anyone else and so on. Now we're saying, well, the military are selling drones that volunteers bring in. The military have their own ways, like dead souls, getting paid for 7 infantrymen in a battalion. One member of parliament, Gorbenko, was talking about this recently. So inside, among the military, there's chaos. Or even worse, it's even messier than in the government offices. Who else could there be? Business is funny, yes, even though it's being squeezed and twisted, it's still suffering. Warehouses are burning because Russia is targeting logistics. Do you see what I mean? The military could come to Zelensky and say, Zelensky, that's enough. We can't handle this. We'll just stop here. We've all had enough of fighting. Business could come to Zelensky and say, well, Zelensky, what are you doing? That's it. Let's make a deal. Look, they took out the warehouse here. We won't have any medicine here tomorrow. Our source is burned over there. It's just kind of funny, like the source is burned. But if people have a company taking losses, they must shut down or act. These are jobs at stake and so on. Akhmedov, for example, could just come out and say, that's it. I don't have these resources. Let's wrap it up. What should I do? Who are there? Priests, clergy, I don't know, teachers, doctors from different backgrounds. It feels like, why aren't there these voices from different parts of Ukrainian society calling on Zelensky to put an end to this?
There are so few real radicals that none exist, Uwe Zakov. I suspect the oligarchs still profit regardless. Some are probably afraid of ending up like Kolomoisky. And I think in the current situation, he could easily do the same to someone else. The smaller ones are also being careful, I know this personally, and they're staying silent. Almost everyone in the military wants the war to end, except the commanders, to be continued. As someone who hasn't been to the front, I tried not to act like I know too much, but I just can't take it anymore. And then someone sent me a cool clip from some broadcast. I showed it on my stream last time. A soldier sits, thinking the commanders don't want the war to end, and says, they withhold water from us. Money, 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 it's all about money. And I ask, well, what did you do before the war? To the commander. Were you a migrant worker? And today I'm just a handsome guy. I live the life of an entrepreneur. I got this from Ayn Rand. It's a classic, that's all. When money and resources leave the creative, productive class. To all sorts of people like that. Let's not point fingers or name them. The country is doomed. It's already heading into the abyss. That's how it will be, and that's what's happening. If you want to make a lot of money in life, go work, become a professional in some field, start a business. Maybe a doctor or lawyer, but not like this, you understand. Conversely, this is driven by propaganda. Remember that was Alina Mercedes. She said she wanted a Rolls Royce and a Bentley, and we discussed this with you a few months ago. Well, in America, the military doesn't dream about Bentleys. Excuse me, those are some serious military people, let me tell you, and even they don't dream about Bentleys. Moreover, their ethics wouldn't allow them to drive a military Bentley. It's a completely different story.
Well, by the way, yes, that's also an interesting point. Yes, a military man in a Bentley. She showed up somewhere there, she did. Did you notice how the slang is changing? They say ukiles. And there's also this joke, you know, like God, TCK, it's Godin. And everyone finds it so funny, and everyone is so happy. Usually those happy have nothing to do with TCK. Either they have connections, or an exemption, or a reason, or something, and they just kind of laugh at this whole process. But in reality, terrible things are happening.
This is something to cry about, not laugh at.
But what will happen after the war, you know? So after the war, I think, why is this truce happening? Well, we also talked about this with you in some later broadcasts, earlier broadcasts when Trump. And it seems Trump, well, Lukashenko is sharp after all. He has a keen eye. He says Trump regarding Ukraine, it's all just a show. So basically that's exactly what we're seeing. Watch the show in the Oval Office. It's a performance like, I'll give you this, I won't give you that. Even though it was clear that no one was going to give anything. Well, so all of this, all these moments and all these performances, and the price, it turns out, is the lives of the spectators at this moment. And do you understand what the point is? This hope appeared, it seemed, when Trump took a side and clearly said there would be no ceasefire, there would be a peace agreement, and everything would end. That is without a pause. And Zelensky needs a pause precisely to preserve this system of hierarchy and control, also the TCC. Because if, let's say, the war ends tomorrow and we have a peace agreement that prevents it from starting again, then the TCC officers are no longer needed. If the TCC officers aren't needed, it means people will go after them. Well, I'm speaking in a very, very bookish way. Well, some will run away, some won't. Not everyone will escape. There are people being dragged by the police. Our country has basically become a police state. The police have changed. They once stayed above the fray or stood aside, but now they're directly using these methods. And that's what's scary. That's when the crackdowns will start. What do you think? Well, disband the TCK, disband the police. Well, we need some kind of Georgian way. Remember when Saakashvili fired and rehired everyone? It didn't fix the real issue, but at least the scenery changed. To be continued.
No, it actually solved Georgia's problem for a while. For example, my whole reform plan is about removing everyone, getting rid of all the cops and judges, otherwise you can't fix the system. Half measures won't work in Ukraine at this point. You also raise many questions at once. I'll explain Zelensky's stance on the ceasefire and why he supports it, but opposed an immediate lasting peace. To agree on the sessions. Everyone knows Putin, and Zelensky has opportunities. That's the main point. The ceasefire failed, and any new ceasefire will also fail. Zelensky calls Trump and says, well, I told you, it's impossible to make deals with them. So give me weapons, give me money, and I'll be here. Like he told Tusk, fighting for another 2 to 3 years. That's the plan. If Trump and Putin shake hands, you'll have no choice but to go along with it. That's the plan. About the Tomahawks, the thing is, no one on Trump's team ever seriously discussed them. That never really happened. It was just for the media. Zelensky was upset about it after Washington. Not just because they didn't give them, but because he realized this issue was never on the agenda. Do you understand? And about the TCK, I want to tell you, I know the situation well. So different people work at the TCK. Many military personnel have truly seen combat. But there are also people there who realize, well, guys, if I'm not here, then I'm on the other side, and they'll pack me up the same way. And they try to behave themselves more or less decently. Plus, the leadership, some are complete monsters, some are more or less reasonable. Security service of Ukraine officers and so on work with them everywhere. But that's not the point. The point is, those who ordered it must be punished as always. The tip of the iceberg, the ones carrying it out are Ukraine. It's the state, if you give the order, everyone will always follow it. There's the Minister of Internal Affairs, Plimenko. It's under him that the cops are doing this. So who should be held accountable? They're all criminals committing crimes against their own people.
Do you think Zelensky currently benefits from Russification?
I told you, it's now part of a bigger strategy. That's the only way we can keep the situation under control, by intimidating everyone. I just don't want to say to what extent. I'll tell you, the goal is to make everyone, politicians, regular people, and the media, crap their pants. And that's how we can, taking advantage of the situation, that's how we'll keep everything under control. Originally, they didn't have such plans. There was a telethon, and that was it.
Well, obviously all these videos are kind of an anti-telethon. And then they get upset and ask who's filming this. Not enemies, just Ukrainians, though everyone is sharing it.
Today you gave an example. Chudak said posting the TCC even once makes you an enemy. They'll come after you. The government-funded show features Zolkin the cop, a killer released early under the Savchenko law who was turned into a propagandist. I liked Shikman, did you see? No, they gave airtime to Irina Zolkin, and there was some guy and another one of his. She tore them apart there, even with Security Service of Ukraine security and all the important people around. That's how it works. It's a lot of money, and their process is thorough. And believe me, they don't say anything on their own. They say what they've been told. Subtitles.
Yes, friends, let's sum up the results of today's poll. Finish the sentence. Pokrovsk is the gateway at 4%, Minsk at 3%, and Zamorovsky. So 12% for Shatunwell. Pokrovsk will undermine the authority of Chersky, Zelensky, their image. In general, all these for Tepesi. So Shatun will begin. 34% is hell, escalation, and further loss of territory. And 49% is into nowhere. Because, you know, they'll just play dumb with a straight face, say there's nothing happened and everything is fine. That's how it was intended. Well, so you see how people agreed with you, with your opinion that you expressed at the very beginning? But that's upsetting. Well, it's upsetting. I mean, how is it that Pokrovsk? So many people died, so many were there. Why? Just to agree it happened and say that's good.
No, nothing at all suggests the situation will improve. The longer it continues, the worse it becomes. Nothing can make a difference, Oana. Ukraine has leveled out. There can't be any advantage. Russia is too large and wealthy, with Europe funding Putin's terrorism as its top gas buyer. Oh, I looked at the latest data, everything is great. And you, Zelensky, go fight your own country, build military factories, and drown your citizens in blood over there. That's the strategy. All of this is clear.
Let's move on to your questions, dear friends. Let's start with the community first, then the live chat. So, Okay. Hello, Alexander. This one is about Spivak, so let's move on to a question for Dennis. I'll skip this one. Well, in general, does Zelensky need to disrupt the negotiations between Putin and Trump in Budapest? Or is he supposed to reach some sort of agreement? Well, it's just a general thought. Alexei is asking Dennis a question. In his opinion, why did the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine fail on February 28, 2022 and March 3, 2022 in Belarus? With respect.
I don't know. Ask Elisevich, who was part of the negotiation group, to explain. I know Istanbul was in May as far as I remember. No.
This, as I understand, this...
Minsk, I don't know. This...
The very first negotiations. Yes, I
remember, yes, by helicopter when we flew there to Belarus, I think. I remember that, but I don't know. Let those who took part in the events tell about it. I know about Istanbul, but not that.
So good evening, Alexander. Dennis. Question. Have the American Democrats successfully restored democracy in Ukraine as they understand it? Chukhanov can confirm. Now the American Republicans have declared a crusade against the drug cartels. This might worry Zelensky because now anyone can be labeled as a narco-terrorist threatening the United States. Thank you in advance for your response.
No, well, I don't want to, I don't like using words like that, but he's a real vatnik, that's all. He hasn't lived a single real day in his life. This listener is in a democracy, and he's talking about American democracy. There's no democracy in Ukraine, and there never really was. There was imitation, but in America there's true democracy, which this person can't grasp on a biological level.
No, well, listen, you can throw around labels, but that doesn't change the essence of things. Look, under the pretext of drug cartels, Trump already has Venezuela on the hook, and he's added Colombia in exactly the same way.
So what does democracy have to do with it here?
No, it's just that before it was all under the guise of fighting for democracy, like Iraq and all those countries. So, Yugoslavia was considered undemocratic, but now it's a different excuse, like drug cartels. That's how it is, under the pretext of drug cartels. And the United States is going into South America, and it's quite possible that there could be a war.
Yes, and it will be limited, but it will happen. You invited me on air after Trump's victory a month or two later, and I told you there's a plan to get rid of all the dictators. I mentioned Venezuela and Cuba to you there as well. Rick Scott, the Florida senator where I live, recently gave an interview and mentioned Venezuela and Cuba to you. The viewers will figure out the rest themselves, even the one writing from Russia.
So, Alexandra, does that mean you're in Alaska? Putin accepted Witkoff's plan, but the all-powerful Trump couldn't fulfill his part of that plan.
Can you explain, Sash? I didn't understand the question.
Look, Russians say, well, I'm just shortening the long questions a bit here. And this, yes, look, well, okay, let's do it in full. Now again, it turns out that Trump hasn't shifted toward long-term peace, but as he said at the press conference in Anchorage, toward a ceasefire. Why is Russia to blame if it's in Anchorage? According to Lavrov, they asked the American side again if they understood the plan correctly, and they were told yes, and they agreed to it. The fact that Trump couldn't carry out his own proposed plan, who's to blame for that? The United States moving from long-term peace to a ceasefire suggests it was just theater, in my view. Because if the root causes are resolved, the United States will lose a useful asset that hurts Russia and distracts Russia with the war.
The first thing is what they call the root causes. Unfortunately, does that mean they win in terms of propaganda? I agree the root causes are language, religion, and political and speech freedoms, which need resolution. In my understanding, this is not a question of Putin or the Russian world, but of democracy in Ukraine. As for the person quoting Lavrov, well, I think that's questionable. Lavrov said before the war, we won't fight Ukraine for just a month or two. So what actually happened? I'm not going to comment on Lavrov or on a person who believes in Lavrov.
No, then comment on America, Trump America.
Didn't disrupt anything.
Watch this, it's either a show. So the war would continue conditionally, weakening Russia by making it spend resources. In Anchorage, I mean, or maybe they really agreed on something, but Trump can't fulfill the Anchorage agreement. Because there is, let's say, Europe and Zelensky who are playing their own game.
You know, there was supposed to be some kind of compromise from Russia, but Putin didn't fulfill it either. No one fulfilled anything there. Continuation. They are apparently not capable, not viable. It was about a compromise from Russia, and then it turned out that Putin sees the line of demarcation as a compromise. That's the maximum compromise Russia is willing to make. It's the same as Donbass. Then the territory of Dati, which is under Ukraine's control, was discussed, and Trump really didn't like that. So who didn't follow the rules there, we can only guess, we weren't present, but to believe Lavrov, that's...
So a question for the guest from Oksana. Dennis really thinks that there are countries where people can influence some decisions made by politicians. Even protests don't help. There are many examples of this. Is there an example where protests brought people a tangible positive result in their struggle? I would like to hear about it. That's a good question, by the way.
Yes, that's a good question. A person is biologically wired that way, and their brain is so conditioned that they see themselves as an animal with an owner. People like that can't live differently. I can't explain it. They just can't understand me on a basic level. In Israel, people influence the course of events. In Argentina, people influence the course of events. In America, people influence the course of events. In any democratic country, people influence the course of events. There is little real democracy in the world.
It doesn't stick, Dennis. So, did the protests have a strong impact on Netanyahu?
Well, of course, it influenced his decision one way or another, but...
Currently, for example, protests in the United States involve 7 million people. No kings, that's like no king. Well, do you think it really influences Trump a lot?
Wait, No Kings is funded by Soros, just like the opposition to Netanyahu. That's another story. The person was probably asking about some real protests. Yeah. But for some reason, he doesn't continue the topic. What about the elections? Israel and America have fair elections, except when the Democrats allegedly rigged one, possibly for the first time in United States history. That's how it happened. And this issue is resolved, but it's a major problem for democracy globally. People don't realize elections can be fair, not just Putin or Lukashenko claiming 70%. It's simple for them, they just can't understand it. Does that really happen? Yes, it does, it happens.
No, the question wasn't about the elections, but about which protests actually succeeded.
No, it was about where someone truly influences something. That was the start.
Question.
Then there were protests. In democracies, people have influence. These measurements are ongoing. The authorities are afraid because they feel their position is unstable. In America, people have weapons, and the Constitution guarantees the right to armed rebellion. Of course, these are people who are free to the core. But for these people, everything everywhere has been decided, everything is fake, it's all just a facade, and in reality, it's the same everywhere. That's not true. Of course, every government tries to suppress its citizens nowadays, except for Argentina. That's the default setup, but it doesn't eliminate democracy. Are you saying Switzerland doesn't have democracy, but Austria does? Those may be the only two European countries with democracy left.
I'm just curious. In Argentina, it's a mess there. Protests, unpopular economic reforms. To say that Zelensky announced during our broadcast that he had a call with Milei, well, but he's winning. His party is winning in the elections. Milei, yes.
Yes.
Despite protests and shock among pensioners and others, well, the situation there is unstable from a social point of view. There's tension. People protest, yet he still wins elections.
I'll add that if someone like me brings such reforms to Ukraine tomorrow, similar protests will happen. Everything will be the same as in Argentina. Any society that lived wrongly, lacked a real market economy, and had many freeloaders faces this fate. Especially petty corruption. And of course, many people will be dissatisfied. Naturally, yes, this is an absolutely normal process. Reformers always face resistance. Nothing goes smoothly. He got 40% in the parliamentary elections. The bicameral parliament has many senators and deputies. Reforms will accelerate.
Elisevich believes Lukashenko and Putin are assigning themselves 70%.
No, they don't give themselves 70%. I agree that a lot of people support them, but they add some percentage on top. I'm not saying they would lose without rigging. I'm not claiming that. They've broken people. Many are slaves. People need a slave owner like that. Well, I feel sorry for them.
Right. Well, again, there are debates about this. Honest elections in the live stream chat? Where are there even honest elections? So there's skepticism about the honesty of the elections. Especially, after Romania, it's even more so.
I'm against this. I report on it and speak out. It's wrong. What Durov said about the pressure from the French intelligence services deleting channels there, about Moldovan politics, about Romanian politics, because they're bad. I condemn all of that and speak out against it. Europe is in trouble.
What does Elisevich think about the Montian case? That's the question
I don't follow her because I find her unpleasant and crazy. And I don't even know what this is about.
So, okay. A question for Elisevich. Isn't it thought that for both Putin and Zelensky, the only way out of a stalemate is to go all in? War with NATO and Europe, using this as a pretext for general mobilization.
No. Putin is avoiding general mobilization as much as he can. That would seriously weaken his political achievements. There will be no war with NATO.
No, listen, this is important. I understand what they're saying. He is writing about the fact that basically, there is a big difference. Zelensky's approval rating was 16% at the start of the war and he nearly faced overthrow. Well, honestly, Putin has a different story right now, so he doesn't need to throw the country into the fire just to stay in power.
Well, of course.
Only Zelensky would think of that. It might have started with those shellings when the missiles began. Do you remember the first day? Everyone, of course, got alarmed. People rushed to the military enlistment offices. That could have been the point to stop, but, they didn't stop. Putin...
He will spin any outcome as a win. I get that. His policies won't impact his political rating. Any war ending...
Zelensky will portray any result as a win.
He will try, but whether he will actually sell it, we'll see.
Alina Vostroilova. Why do people go into power? Is it only to improve finances or boost testosterone, or do they simply enjoy it? That's an interesting philosophical question.
Proofreader A. Kulakova. That's absolutely true. In decent countries, people don't go to steal. Javier Milei didn't go to steal in Argentina. He went to make history and do great things. They go to build a country where they themselves would want to live. Here's Trump as an example. The man has it all, billions, influence, everything. He could have played golf in Florida, but instead he went and got shot at. For what? He wants to leave his grandchildren and children a great America, where you can live, earn decent money, and have democracy. Some people like that do exist, though not many. People from the Soviet Union and Ukraine can't understand it. This especially worries me. We've faced accusations of sponsorships, funding, and being an agent or double agent, but none are true. And that's it.
Sergei asks if Elisevich admits that the United States and the European Union deliberately created the monster Zelensky for their own selfish interests. Yes.
The European Union, yes. The European Union, definitely yes. They created him. That plan wasn't well thought out. They just exploited the situation. Exactly. Not the United States, but the Biden administration and Democrats. But they don't respect him either. Even Democrats who worked with him speak disrespectfully about him in private.
Like, he's a pain in the ass, something like that.
That's just what made it into the press. In reality, it's more about Biden, but there are also people lower down. They're not thrilled, to say the least. Everyone gets it.
Next question. Friends, sorry, I got some messages there, but honestly, I didn't really understand them. How can I make your name show up in chat instead of just the user handle after they were on YouTube? That's why I haven't mentioned any names. That's why next question. Which of Russia's demands do you consider acceptable for peace? What should Zelensky concede? Or is it fundamentally impossible to make any concessions?
Concessions will have to be made if we're being serious to end the war. Concessions will have to be made because Ukraine is in a weaker position. Russia is stronger. We're losing. We don't have the resources. We've talked about this countless times. We have to make compromises, but I believe that a compromise can benefit Ukraine. Seriously, Russian language, freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. These political persecutions are claimed to support Ukraine's democracy, not to interfere in politics. He says this is what he wants to do, as long as it's also okay for Putin. What problems are there anyway? Let's look at it again. The Russian language exists in Ukraine today. Half the country speaks Russian. Non-aligned status. Well, we're not in NATO. We're not NATO members. We're not NATO members. Yes, the Russian church exists. What's the problem? Accept it. That's how everything turns out. Not...
Wait a moment. No. What do you mean there's a Russian church?
Well, it's being persecuted, but it still exists.
No, wait, that's a great story, you know. Coughing doesn't mean you have tuberculosis, you know, and I don't.
I don't cough. You understand perfectly well. I'm against the persecution. I believe that if a person works, if this clergyman works for Russian intelligence services, he should be brought to justice. Shutting down the entire denomination or closing the religion is idiotic and impossible.
Why is National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine silent after regaining powers? They're awaiting a White House signal.
There's an intense war between National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and the Security Service of Ukraine, with more to come. The White House doesn't control National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine was created by globalist Democrats, with the Republicans not involved and staying neutral. The Trump administration.
Question. How do your words about real democracy in the United States correlate with the dirt and manipulations of the last 3 election cycles? How does this fit with America's non-transparent electoral system?
I already said that the Democrats brought over the worst practices. This never happened before. I spoke out against this and supported President Trump for decades. That's it. I wasn't into media. I was in Kyiv, started a YouTube channel, and supported President Trump. Consistently. Not like some people, let's not name names, who were flip-flopping, changing their opinion every day. And I still do this to this day. I just ask questions, have dialogues. Does it matter whether you like the person or not, whether they're likable? Democrats are a terrible evil. I'm telling you, they tested different technologies specifically in Ukraine and then brought them here. That's just a fact.
No, it's really terrible, of course. Mail-in voting, it's absurd. A person who
doesn't have citizenship but goes and votes. Isn't that just crazy?
Yes, so a question for Dennis. Alexander asks, do you see a difference between Biden and the Democrats in the United States?
No, Biden is a true Democrat. There are different clans within the party. There is infighting everywhere, but Biden still pursued the same policy, which is monstrous from a humanitarian perspective. Kamala is doing the same thing. We can see the result. Look at their children, or at the Hollywood stars in California, every other one is transgender or something like that. It all led to this. It's a nightmare over there, a long story. Democrats are pure evil. I think their party, in its current form, is finished.
Yeah. So, there was another question. It flew away, I think, yeah, something, yeah. All right, friends. So, also something about America, something interesting. There was a moment.
Well, if it's interesting, read it out, yeah.
The chat is moving fast. I lost track of it and it kind of scrolled past. Something there, something about Epstein, I just remember. And how much? Well, yeah, sorry guys, that's my bad. I got a bit carried away here, you see. Biden, there was democracy. Well, it happens. Everything's live. There was a question about Epstein. I'll just ask it myself then. Will Trump be able to get past all these accusations, the Epstein cases, or has he already moved past them? What do you think?
No, certain people won't leave him alone with this case. Sooner or later, something will be published. There are a lot of delicate aspects there. And in today's media, any last name on any list will immediately be labeled a pedophile, and basically everything else too. Simply being near Epstein, dining with him, or taking a photo together doesn't mean you were involved in his actions. That's the whole point.
Yes, friends, thank you all very much for joining us here on the live broadcast. Someone says, are there any admins? No, everything is live, so that's why. At least everything is honest, open, and live. Subscribe to Elisevich, subscribe to SHELEST, like the video, write in the comments what you liked, what you didn't like, what you agree with, and what you don't. Dennis, thank you for your time and thoughts.
Thanks, Sasha, and even the haters for watching.
Well, you know, the height of analytics is that yesterday's hater becomes today's fan. Sometimes it's the opposite, but that doesn't always mean greatness. The most important thing is that we can think, communicate, and express ourselves. This is something that's really lacking in Ukraine, and it's very hard to achieve even in the world with all these recent changes, but we still hope that it won't disappear. Share your thoughts in the comments and take care of yourselves and each other. Wishing you well.